Steve Harvey has built a career on confidence, control, and always having the last word. But lately, cracks are starting to show. From quiet controversies to unexpected backlash, things aren't lining up the way they used to. Fans are asking questions, critics are circling, and the situation feels different this time. Is this just another headline, or the beginning of a much bigger problem Steve Harvey never saw coming? Before Steve Harvey was a household name, he was just a guy chasing a dream, sleeping in his car, living gig to gig, and doing everything he could to survive. He wasn't born into fame or handed a microphone. His path was built the hard way, one joke, one club, one night at a time. In the mid-1980s, everything changed when he stepped on stage for an amateur comedy night, and won. That moment sparked something. He didn't just want to be funny, he wanted to be great. Through the late 80s and early 90s, Steve's name started to spread across comedy circuits. His style was honest, real, and instantly relatable. He wasn't trying to be perfect, he was trying to be himself, and people loved him for it. His big break came when he became the host of Showtime at the Apollo, where he brought his signature charm and street-smart wit to a national audience. He made people laugh, yes, but more than that, he made them feel like they knew him. Then came The Steve Harvey Show, a sitcom where he played a high school music teacher. It wasn't just comedy, or it was comfort. Families gathered around to watch him not just be funny, but be human. He was the guy who cracked jokes but also gave advice, who got the laugh and still taught the lesson. That balance made him more than a comedian. It made him a voice people trusted. By the time he joined the original Kings of Comedy tour, he was a star. The Spike Lee-directed film of that tour turned him into something more, a cultural symbol. He represented perseverance, faith, and hustle. From late-night sets to daytime TV, from radio to best-selling books, Steve Harvey became a voice for people who felt unseen, especially in Black communities. Not just a comedian, a connector, a storyteller, a guide, and somehow, even with all the suits and success, he still felt like one of us. Steve Harvey spent decades building himself up. From sleeping in his car to standing on the biggest stages in the world. He became known as the man with the loud suits, the big laugh, and the even bigger heart. He was quick-witted, relatable, and always in control, whether he was telling jokes, giving advice, or hosting game shows. But even the most polished performers stumble. And for Steve, one mistake became unforgettable, not just for him, but for millions watching around the globe. It happened in 2015. Harvey was hosting the Miss Universe pageant, a live international event watched by millions. Things were going smoothly. The stage was set, the energy was high, and as the show neared its dramatic conclusion, Steve took center stage to announce the winner. He opened the envelope, read the name, and with full confidence, declared Miss Columbia the winner. Music played, flowers were handed over, and the crown was placed on her head. And then came the silence. Moments later, Harvey returned to the stage, his face different now, tense, focused, almost disbelieving. With cameras still rolling, he did what few people would have the courage to do in front of the entire world. He admitted he'd made a mistake. The real winner was Miss Philippines, not Miss Columbia. He had read the card wrong. The room froze. Audiences around the world froze. What was supposed to be a celebration instantly turned into one of the most awkward and painful moments in live television history. The footage went viral in seconds. Memes flooded the internet. Commentators everywhere were weighing in. How could this happen? How could Steve Harvey, the seasoned pro, the sharp host, the guy who never misses, make that mistake? Steve didn't run from it. He owned it. He apologized right away, both on camera and in the hours and days that followed. He didn't blame the producers. He didn't blame the teleprompter. He didn't hide. He stood there in full view of the public and admitted it was all on him. Later, he called it the most humiliating moment of his career, and you could see he meant it. And yet, that moment showed a different side of Steve Harvey. Not the confident entertainer, but the human being behind the microphone. He handled it with honesty, accountability, and even grace, considering how bad it looked. It was painful to watch, but also strangely admirable. Not because he made the mistake, but because of how he responded to it. Still, the damage was done. For weeks, it was all anyone could talk about. Every late-night show had a joke. Every media outlet had a headline. The internet didn't just move on, It replayed the clip over and over, turning his worst moment into a punchline. And even though Steve continued to host Miss Universe in the years that followed, the shadow of that one mistake followed him everywhere. But that wasn't the last controversy. In 2017, something completely different and somehow more personal came out. A leaked email. Not a scandalous secret, but a staff memo Steve had written to the team working on his talk show. In it, he told employees not to approach him in the hallways or knock on his dressing room door without permission. It was short, direct, and very clear. He wanted boundaries. He needed space. But when the email got out, people didn't see it as a request for privacy. They saw it as arrogance. The internet exploded again. Headlines claimed he was rude, that he thought he was above everyone, that the friendly, approachable Steve Harvey was just a front. The memo was dissected, quoted, and dragged across every platform. Steve responded calmly but firmly. He said the email wasn't meant to hurt anyone. It was meant to solve a problem. His open-door policy had been taken advantage of. People were coming in and out of his space nonstop. He couldn't focus, he couldn't prepare, and he didn't want to be mean to anyone face-to-face, so he laid it out in writing. To him, it was about professionalism, not ego. And truthfully, a lot of people understood that. But by then, the narrative had already taken shape. People love stories that tear down their heroes. And this was one more reason for critics to say, see, he's not who you think he is. For someone who built his brand on being real, honest, and accessible, it stung. He wasn't being called out for lying or cheating. He was being called out for setting boundaries. It's the kind of backlash that's hard to fight, especially in the age of social media. One message taken out of context can change the way people see you. And no matter how clear or reasonable your explanation is, it can be drowned out by outrage. Then came the jokes, the commentary, another round of memes, and yet again, Steve had to step up, explain himself, and hope people would see the bigger picture. Later that same year, he faced even more backlash over a joke he made on his show, this time aimed at Asian men. It was part of a dating segment, and Steve said something that many saw as not just unfunny, but offensive and out of touch. The reaction was swift. Accusations of racism flooded social media. People demanded an apology, and Steve gave one. He didn't hide. He said he was wrong. He apologized sincerely. Still, the moment added another layer to a growing perception that Steve Harvey, once seen as wise and lovable, was showing signs of being out of step with the times. It's not that these moments defined him entirely, but each one added weight. And in a career built on connection, every hit matters. Because when the public starts to wonder if you're losing your touch, it's not just about the headlines. It's about trust. In another era, these moments might have passed quietly. A bad night, a poorly worded email, an off-color joke. But in today's world, everything lives forever online. And Steve Harvey, as smart and media-savvy as he is, found himself in the middle of a cultural shift he couldn't completely control. That's what makes this part of his story so interesting. It's not a fall from grace. It's not a scandal that ends careers. It's something more human. A man who spent decades building trust with the public, now working to keep it. A man who has always prided himself on saying what others were afraid to say, now learning which things should maybe go unsaid. Steve Harvey isn't canceled. He's not broken, but he's not bulletproof either. And these mistakes, these moments, they live on. Not because they were unforgivable, but because they happened so publicly, and because they challenged the image people had of him. Still, through it all, Steve has done what he's always done, kept going. He kept hosting Family Feud, launching new shows, expanding his brand. He didn't let the noise stop him. He didn't disappear. That alone says a lot. But those mistakes, they're part of the story now. They follow him, not as proof of failure, but as reminders of how high the stakes are when the whole world is watching. They show us the price of visibility, the pressure of being perfect, and the very real truth that even the most experienced voices can crack under the weight of a single moment. For Steve Harvey, those moments weren't the end, but they were loud, public reminders that success doesn't make you untouchable. And in a world that watches everything, forgiveness takes time, trust takes work, and reputation, once shaken, is never quite the same. Steve Harvey has always made it look easy. The smile, the timing, the crowd control. He walks onto a stage or in front of a camera and it feels like he's exactly where he belongs. But behind the charm and laughter, there's a different story. A story of pressure, of constantly holding it together while caring more than most people ever see. By the time he became a household name, Steve wasn't just a comedian anymore, he was a full-blown brand. He had TV shows, radio shows, best-selling books, clothing lines, and even his own media company. He wasn't just performing, he was running an empire. And with that came the kind of pressure that doesn't turn off when the cameras stop rolling. Steve created Steve Harvey Global in 2017, a company that gave him full control over his growing business ventures. It was smart. He'd spent decades making other people money. Now he wanted to be the one in charge. But leading a company is a whole different world. It's not about punchlines. It's about structure, strategy, and stress. He was no longer just thinking about jokes and audiences. He was making decisions about budgets, employees, legal contracts, events, branding, partnerships, and more. The kind of stuff that never makes the news, but keeps a person up at night. On top of that, there was his health. Steve has always been open about his past struggles, including the years he spent homeless. But even with success, some battles don't end. As he got older, new ones showed up. He has high blood pressure, prediabetes, sleep apnea, and an autoimmune condition called Sjogren's syndrome. These are not small issues. They require daily management, medication, careful routines, all while maintaining an around-the-clock schedule. And yet, there he was, smiling, hosting, traveling, doing interviews, writing books. Behind the scenes, his body was sending warning signs. But in front of the world, he was the same Steve. Loud, sharp, hilarious. That's the hard part of being the face of something. You can't show cracks. You can't slow down, even when you want to. Then there's the internet. Social media changed everything. In the early days of his career, if someone didn't like you, they told a friend. Maybe wrote a letter. Now, it's a tweet, a meme, a viral clip. True or not, once something catches fire online, it spreads fast. Steve learned that the hard way. In 2023, rumors started to swirl that his wife, Marjorie, had been unfaithful. There was no evidence, no facts, just whispers on social media. But those whispers turned into trending topics. People were making videos, writing threads, speculating on their marriage like it was a Netflix drama. And Steve, who's always been protective of his family, found himself having to address it publicly. Both he and Marjorie denied the rumors, shutting them down with clarity and unity. But the damage was done, not to their marriage, but to their peace. That's the thing about internet chaos. It doesn't need truth, it just needs attention. And for celebrities, especially ones like Steve who have built their careers on being relatable, it hits differently. He's not a mysterious movie star. He's the guy who talks to people every day, the guy who gives advice about love and life. So when people start questioning his own home life, it cuts deeper. All of that, the business, the health, the relationship rumors, the non-stop attention creates a kind of pressure most people never experience. It's invisible. It doesn't show up in headlines, but it's there. And Steve has felt it. He's talked about it. He's said he stopped doing stand-up partly because the world changed. That cancel culture made him feel like he had to constantly watch every word, not because he didn't believe in growing with the times, but because one slip could cost him everything he worked for. One joke taken the wrong way, and decades of building trust could be gone. That's not comedy. That's walking on eggshells. And for someone who built his name on being fearless with a mic, that's a kind of heartbreak you can't see, but you can feel. Still, Steve keeps going. That's what makes him different. He doesn't run. He adapts. He figures it out. He finds a way to keep his voice strong, even when the world feels louder than ever. But the truth is, it's not easy. And behind the big laugh and the bright lights, there's a man who's constantly carrying the weight of his empire, his health, his family, and his reputation, all while trying to be everything people expect him to be. That's pressure, real pressure, and the fact that he's still standing, still working, still smiling. That's not luck. That's grit. Success is a beautiful thing. It shines, it inspires, it tells the world that hard work can pay off. But behind every shining moment, there's a cost, and Steve Harvey knows that cost better than most. From the outside, his career looks like a dream. He's gone from living in his car to standing on stages around the world. He's built an empire, written best-selling books, hosted the biggest shows on TV, and become one of the most recognized faces in entertainment. But what people don't always see is what it takes to carry that much success. The pressure, the expectations, the weight of always needing to be on. There's a moment that happens to anyone who's made it. That quiet, lonely second when you realize that getting everything you wanted doesn't mean life suddenly gets easier. Sometimes it means you have more to lose. And in Steve's case, the higher he climbed, the more complicated things became. He built a public image based on being honest, funny, and grounded. A man who came from nothing and never forgot it. A man who spoke his mind and gave advice like a wise uncle at the family barbecue. That image worked. People trusted him. They saw him not just as a star, but as a voice. Someone who told the truth. Someone who lived it. But being that person, being that symbol, it comes with a price. Because people don't just cheer when you win. They watch when you slip. They talk when you stumble. And they expect you to be the same person forever, even as the world changes and you change with it. Steve has had to learn all of this in real time. He's learned that even when you apologize, not everyone will forgive. That even when you explain yourself, not everyone wants to hear it. That sometimes the past gets pulled back into the spotlight, no matter how far you've come. He's learned that being a public figure means living in a world where every word can be twisted, every joke can be clipped out of context, and every rumor, true or not, can go viral in minutes. He's learned that social media doesn't wait for facts, and that the truth, even when spoken clearly, doesn't always win the headline. But through it all, Steve Harvey has kept going. And that's what makes his story more than just a success story. It makes it a blueprint for survival, not just financial survival, but emotional, personal, and spiritual survival in a world that constantly pulls you in every direction. He could have disappeared. After the Miss Universe mistake, after the leaked memo, after the backlash over his jokes, or the rumors about his marriage, he could have walked away quietly, said enough is enough, and let the noise take over. But he didn't. He stayed in the room. He faced the criticism. He talked about the hard parts. And that choice, the choice to stay visible, to stay working, to stay present, is a kind of strength most people never get credit for. Because Steve's not just trying to entertain anymore, he's trying to leave something behind. A legacy. And not the kind of legacy that's written in gold letters or painted on billboards. A deeper one. One that says, you can mess up. You can fall. You can be misunderstood and still rise again. His story teaches that success isn't about avoiding failure. It's about how you handle it, how you own it, how you keep your head up when people want to bring you down. It teaches that building something real, something lasting, takes more than talent. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes the kind of honesty that sometimes hurts. And it takes knowing who you are, even when everyone else thinks they know better. That's the lesson Steve Harvey is living right now. His legacy isn't done. He's still writing it. One project, one show, one decision at a time. And what makes it powerful is that it's not perfect. It's messy. It's complicated. It's full of wins and losses, just like real life. And maybe that's what makes it matter so much. Because in a world full of filtered perfection and polished success stories, Steve's journey reminds us that the path to greatness doesn't have to look clean. It just has to be real, and it has to keep going. Even when it's hard, he still shows up for his shows, for his family, for himself. He still reinvents, still experiments, still takes risks, and in doing so, he gives every person watching permission to do the same, to chase something bigger even when people say you're too old, to try something new, even when the world wants you to stay in your lane, to admit when you were wrong, to grow, to evolve, to be more than just one version of yourself. That's the real legacy. Not the titles, not the ratings, not the money, but the example of someone who started with nothing, built everything, and still had the courage to keep learning, keep falling, keep trying. So when we look at Steve Harvey now, we're not just seeing a comedian or a TV host. We're seeing a man who's fought to stay human in a world that demands perfection. A man who knows the spotlight burns hot and stands there anyway. And for future generations, that might be the most important part of all, because success comes in many forms, but staying true to yourself through all of it might be the rarest one. And Steve Harvey, flaws and all, is still out here doing exactly that. Still standing, still laughing, still writing his story, and reminding the rest of us that it's never too late to rewrite ours.